Hey folks, thanks for checking out Reigniting Liberty. I'm Deneen Borelli and Dr. Tom Borelli is in the house, bringing you the truth in black and white. Folks, we have a great guest joining us today. It's Republican Connecticut State Representative Kimberly Fiorello. Kimberly represents the 149th District in Greenwich, Connecticut, which covers parts of Greenwich and also Stamford. Kim is in her first term and is running for re-election. And we're going to discuss the Project Veritas investigation, a video that exposed political, age, and religious bias of an assistant principal at the Cos Cob Elementary School in Greenwich. And we're also going to pick up on Kimberly's campaign and the environment in Greenwich and what she is hearing from her constituents. Kimberly, welcome to the show.
Oh, great to be here. And I love Reigniting Liberty, so thank you.
Well, thank you for taking the time. We know you're a very, very busy lady. So let's start with the Project Veritas investigation, something that is creating a lot of buzz locally, something that a lot of parents were not aware of. There was a video that came out on the Jeremy Boland. He is the assistant principal of Cos Cob Elementary School. And this video exposed how Boland seeks to block the hiring of conservatives, of Catholics in the Cos Cob school, which is just unbelievable. Boland's motivation appears to be hiring teachers that will carry forth the Democrat message to school children. And keep in mind, folks, this is an elementary school, pre-K through fifth grade. So, Kimberly, what were your first thoughts when you saw this video?
I mean, you know, I'm a mother of 4 kids, and I have, in fact, I have exactly those grades. I have a third grader and a fifth grader, and you're talking about the ages of an 8-year-old and a 10-year-old, and I have older children as well. But when this video came across, it's 12 minutes of watching somebody talk about a neighborhood school, and he's in a position of trust, you know, earning taxpayer salary and in charge of young minds in our community. And he clearly has a political agenda, and what he does is illegal in his discriminatory hiring practices. But more insidious than that is he makes it plain as day that he inculcates a culture among the folks that at least he has control over hiring to undermine parents. It's kind of our worst nightmare, but the good news is it's better that we know. And to have this kind of frank evidence out there is just the most clarifying kind of sunshine we can have for our schools. And this is our children, these are schools, and this absolutely has to be addressed. I'm very grateful to Project Veritas for the work that they do. I never thought that their work would have this close of an impact in my community, but I'm very grateful.
So, Kimberly, with Mr. Boland, do you think he's an outlier, or do you think he's the tip of the iceberg with respect to the indoctrination of children in Greenwich schools, or maybe even schools throughout Connecticut? What's your view?
Well, serving on the education committee, I pay close attention to what I hear coming out of all the different boards of eds meetings and the parents, what the kind of conversations they're bringing forward to their boards of eds. And it's an issue across our state. He is not alone. You know, the way he speaks about how he creates this subtle culture. He's also someone who has been promoted throughout the school system. So, you know, I think we must get to the bottom and understand how broad this kind of perspective is in our school system. But it's not new information to parents. It's, you know, bombshell news for the media in Connecticut, perhaps. But for many of the parents, you know, with kind of a knot in their throat, it was confirmation finally that what they felt about being gaslit is true. They have been seeing in Greenwich alone, you know, sort of toxic masculinity or this whole idea of anti-racist thinking this critical thinking that, America is fundamentally racist. This has come across in surveys. This whole idea that everything has to be broken down, even our most basic understanding of sexuality, this is coming across in our schools. It's been very alarming for Greenwich parents. But each time it's brought through and there's a teacher that pushes it, whether it's a teacher in Greenwich who wanted to cancel Mother's Day and call it Birthing Parents Day. It's always a one-off incident. But you connect these dots and parents are understanding this is not one-off. And thanks to Project Veritas, we have really great confidence that we must demand a true investigation. And I think parents have to trust but verify. We have our first selectman doing an investigation, the Board of Education doing an investigation, the Connecticut Attorney General doing an investigation. But it's parents. The buck stops with parents, and we will trust but verify, and we're not letting this go until we get an education system in Connecticut that puts parents first.
So let's take a listen to some of the comments that Mr. Boland made. Wow, so Mr. Boland is just bragging away and that he could get away with all this nonsense, Kimberly. What are you hearing from your constituents on this?
A lot of concern, worry that this will get swept under the rug. Nobody wants to just let this go. But there's a little silver lining in his conversation where he says he can't get around parents, and I think that is emboldening to parents because it's your child. It's not the state's child. It's not some school administrator's child. It's yours. And the fact that Greenwich parents and parents across Connecticut are asserting themselves, it's having an impact. And folks like Mr. Boland, who feel that it's their job, their mission in life to indoctrinate our children, they get into this education profession and they violate the trust of parents. These folks are realizing they're going to hit a wall that's going to stop them, and it is the parents. And I took a lot of hope in his conversation where he said, the parents are getting in the way of his work. And I thought that was good.
Wow.
So, Kimberly, what could be done from the state level? Obviously, you're a representative, 149th District, which encompasses, again, as Deneen mentioned, parts of Greenwich and Stamford, Connecticut. But in your position as a state legislator, what can you do to prevent things like this happening in the future?
Well, this past year, I put in a bill for a parental bill of rights, and I will do that again. And I want parents to know that this will make a difference for them in the state of Connecticut. Our laws in Connecticut already put a lot of leeway for parental rights to be violated, whether it's in healthcare decisions. Just this past year, we included language for gender dysphoria, where that kind of services can be given to your children without parental notification, mostly through the school system. So we absolutely need to have a parental bill of rights. And what that will do is reassert parents as the primary decision makers for their children in the state of Connecticut. And this will give them the right to have access to the kinds of speakers that come into their schools, to the kind of curriculum that their teachers are pushing, to the training that the teachers themselves are getting. Sometimes they're blocked by saying, well, this is proprietary training from the company, this is copyrighted, and parents are left in the dark beyond the reach of FOIA. But a parental bill of rights will get through all of that and ensure that when a parent asks a question about what's being taught in the schools, what is being put into the minds of their kids, they have a right to that answer.
No,
So I
that's
just
so
want to
true.
follow up on something. You mentioned
Yeah.
something about gender dysphoria, and in Connecticut, parents don't have the right, but the school system can take control.
What that is in Connecticut, we have clauses where parents do not have to be notified for certain kinds of medical care of our kids. It includes kids who are getting alcohol abuse treatment. Children can get an HIV or an STD test from the school nurse, or access through the school or some outside medical clinic without parental notification. One of the biggest ones is that minors in Connecticut can get an abortion without parental notification. And this year is part of the abortion, so-called abortion expansion access bill that the Democrats passed in Connecticut. They inserted the language gender dysphoria treatments under the clause on reproductive rights or reproductive care. And that falls under the purview of no parental notification.
Wow. So, in other words, Mr. Boland could make the medical decision to give some sort of hormone blocking shot to children that the parents would have no idea?
Or the medical clinician at that school or any of our Connecticut schools. We also passed some really sweeping mental health bills in Connecticut that will be inserting a whole cadre of mental health professionals in the schools. And I did vote against these bills because, to me, I saw this as creating, wedges between parents and children. And it can be intimidating for parents if you have, a psychoanalyst, a psychotherapist, mental health professionals telling you about your child, and or not telling you about your child. And it's that kind of access that I think cannot become the norm in Connecticut. And so, yes, in this sense, you will have we do already have, and we will have more medical professionals in Connecticut schools, and they have an ability to advise and actually implement health care to our children without parental notification.
Well, that to me, that sounds crazy. B, that sounds crazy. And the first thing that comes to my mind is, gee, if Mr. Boland is going to block conservatives and Catholics because he doesn't like their political views, just imagine the type of psychotherapist they would hire or other medical professional.
This is the fight of our lives. I've said many times, education reform is the civil rights fight of our time, especially in Connecticut. But parents have to understand that of all the 49 states, other states out there, Connecticut really is the wild, wild west. When you put your children into these schools, you really don't realize how much you're giving away your parental rights. And that has to change.
Wow.
It will change.
It's actually very stunning. And to what degree do you think parents are aware of some of the things you just outlined there?
I think this is the work of politicians like myself. This is my first term up there, and
Yeah.
I'm stunned by a lot of what I saw. Whether it's in the way that we pass spending bills, or the zoning laws are another topic. But yes, serving on education and realizing, and even listening in on other committees, health services committee, I'm stunned. But there's a lot that Connecticut citizens don't know. We talk about transparency and accountability in government, but it's vital. But nowhere does it matter more than this desire to separate parents from their children, to undermine the role that parents play. Any civil society that we can have as a flourishing community has to put parents first. So we're definitely getting that backwards, and we're going to fix that. And I have tried, and I will continue, and I'm grateful to this platform, Reigniting Liberty, to be able to talk about this as well.
Well, we're always happy to have you here. And the power should be in the hands of the parents. Getting back to Mr. Boland, do you think he's going to be held accountable in any way?
If myself and other parents have anything to do with it, absolutely. And we will stay on top of that. Yes, he will be held accountable.
I think you mentioned this before, but if you could elaborate, are there other examples of gender identification education or critical race theory? Are these sorts of teachings happening in the Greenwich school system, Stanford, or even in the state?
So we have some FOIA requests that I have put in, and other parents have put in, and we are going to begin to connect more of these dots and pull the evidence. But we have results of FOIA requests, and they do show that, contrary to the superintendent of Greenwich Schools saying there isn't critical race theory in our school system, there most certainly is. And one evidence is that all teachers in Connecticut were trained on Robin DiAngelo's book, White Fragility. And that is a book from the tome of anti-racist thinking. Anti-racist thinking is critical race theory. It seeks to insert racism into every conversation and to, break down society along the lines of there's not much you can do because everything is a systemic racist problem. And what is that if not critical race theory? Perhaps they're not teaching it directly to the children, but the fact that all teachers read that book, had this summer reading assignment and conversations around the book, and actually had training on it, tells you, as Mr. Boland intimated, it's subtle. And the teachers are getting inculcated in this thought. And that's the culture that is being revealed in our Greenwich schools. And it's unacceptable to many parents.
The first word that comes is shooting through my brain is just brainwashing.
Yeah.
Brainwashing the teachers, then they will turn around and brainwash the children. It is truly frightening.
Well, indoctrination means, putting into the minds of somebody through constant repetition, one way of thinking and getting to the point where that person no longer questions it. And Mr. Boland describes exactly that the teachers don't say this is a leftist or democratic way of doing things, but they make it so that it's the norm. And as he said, it's subtle. And that is indoctrination of kindergartners and fifth graders. And, it chills the blood in my body to think what happens when these kids are high schoolers and the kind of division we're creating in homes across my community and across our state.
No, that's huge, actually. What's the response from Democrats? Have you noticed? Have you heard anything in regards to what Mr. Boland has done?
It's shooting the messenger was, something that we saw. Who is Project Veritas?
Yeah.
What kinds of journalistic methods do they use? But if you to investigate, to interrogate, you have to get to the truth. And it would be beautiful if they did this and found that there was nothing there. That would be great. But and I think in the face of the discrimination against Catholics and the age discrimination, all parties have come to the table to say, well, this is civil rights violations. And so there is that commonality. But parents, I think, of all stripes want to ensure that there's real education happening. This also happens on the backdrop that Connecticut schools in general are not doing great. Our education commissioner recently had a press conference to talk about the results of our math and English language testing results across the state, and it's not great. I mean, you're looking at statistics where, across the state, less than 50% of our kids are at a state mandated, a state approved level of reading and math, and that state approved level is already not very high. So we have to get education right in our state.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely. This is really truly eye-opening and frightening, this interview, because I had no idea our education system here in Connecticut was such a runaway train, and in fact, indeed, a train wreck. But I'm glad, and I know Deneen is glad that you're there for us on the front lines. But that leads me to my next question. Why did you decide to run as a state representative? You have 4 children, you mentioned. I'm sure your life was very busy at the time. So clearly you've taking some personal sacrifice to do this, because Hartford isn't around the block. So what compelled you to run for office?
I was, having a conversation with my husband about this as well, and there is personal sacrifice. Thank you for acknowledging that's there. But it's a case of, if not me, then who? I think all of us should take a turn to get up to Hartford and see how our government is run. I don't intend to be there forever. I think it's wrong that we have politicians who are up there for decades on end. But I'm serving my time. In some sense, I had an interest when I was younger to go into the military. It didn't turn into a career for me, but I've had an instinct to want to be involved in my community. When the state rep who was there decided to retire, I thought, why not? Why shouldn't I be as good a candidate as anybody else? I can serve my community. And that's what I've done. I've served one term. I'm seeking a second term, and I'm going to do exactly what I've done so far, which is, I stand for sound economics. I stand for standing with the law enforcement, parental rights, and local zoning protections. Those are the four tenets of my campaign. Those are good ideas that do not self-implement. These ideas don't go up there and enact themselves. Sound economics, parental rights, protecting local zoning, standing with police, these ideas need champions. And that's the proactive work I've done this past session. And I will do that for 2 more years for the good people of Greenwich and Stamford.
And what are some of the key differences between you and your Democrat opponent?
I think all these Democrats, they're status quo. They go up there and it's the Democrat agenda, which is a big government vision for American lives. And that's actually not what was originally intended. It's certainly not what my grandmother escaped North Korea to come to the United States for. As a state rep, I've met so many Korean War veterans. I know that's not why they went to Korea, to fight a war on foreign lands, to stop communism spread across East Asia. And I'm the beneficiary of all of that. And somehow I've landed, with a life in Greenwich. And there's no way that I will ever let this big government agenda happen on my watch. And so I go up there and I read those bills. And when I see something that violates the Constitution, and the Constitution is very clear, we have a limited government to protect individual rights, and that's it. Everything else is left to the flourishing of free market solutions and to people coming up with their best ideas. And that's how America has become this beacon of hope across the entire world. And my opponent and pretty much every other Democrat in Connecticut is the status quo of big government solutions for our state. It has driven the Yankee ingenuity that made Connecticut just brilliant. It drove us into the ground in 3 to 4 short decades. But the good news is that if we can return to the very simple formula of free people, free markets, we can bring it roaring back. And that's the hope I have. To me, saving Connecticut is saving America. And I know that I'm not alone. You guys believe that too. And there are so many other nutmeggers who are not leaving Connecticut. We're staying here because we won't all fit on the peninsula of Florida. And we're going to turn Connecticut around. And that's our service to the entire country and, frankly, the world.
So, Kimberly, you mentioned the words parental rights as a key theme. Do you have any sense? Because in Virginia, it appeared that parental rights cut across the traditional political lines. Do you have a sense or any indications that the parental rights issue can reach not only independents but also some Democrats?
Absolutely, 100%. In Stamford, there are parents there that are, really frustrated, and actually teachers too, because teachers are parents and they are in the school systems. They see how Stanford schools are not thriving. And yet there are examples of schools that do thrive, and they thrive on a fraction of the money that's given to them, and that's charter schools. And so we have parents who want charter schools, who want better education reform, and these are not Republican parents. These are often unaffiliated or they're Democrat parents. And they're beginning to see which party stands with parents and stands with the cause of real education for their kids, focusing on core topics and classical knowledge and rigor. There's one party that's having that conversation, and that's the party that actually even has to push back on the teachers' unions. And that's becoming clearer. I hope to make it as clear as night and day, at least in my campaign. And I think parents are going to be voting with those who stand with the best interests of their children. And that's the Republican Party in Connecticut.
Well, before we let you go, I wanted you to describe something, explain something. Connecticut allows candidates to get state funding. Can you explain that process, and why did you refuse to participate in that?
Thank you so much for bringing that up. That is a real quirk of politics in Connecticut. It's a bad quirk. We're the only state in the country that has welfare for politicians. And it's sort of wrapped in always this false virtue that it keeps dark money out. But that's not what it does. This is taxpayer money that politicians can access. And it basically means that my opponent is doing this program. So essentially, I, as a taxpayer, am funding my opponent's campaign. And you're taking away the voluntary choice of supporters to support the candidates they want to support. This is called coercive political funding, where you just take taxpayer dollars, and anybody who wants to raise their hand and meet a bare minimum of a threshold can access taxpayer grant money to run for an office. And this has had an insidious effect in, one, making politicians lazy in Connecticut, because they only have to raise a certain amount and they just get this big check that comes to them from the state. And then two, it has made the people, the voters of Connecticut, lazy and have less skin in the game, because they've been trained now to think $5 to a candidate is all I have to give. And what is money if not a reflection of your hard work, your efforts, and your values? And in Connecticut, we have completely devalued the efforts of people who run for office. We now price it at $5. That's all it's worth. And I don't believe in that. And I only want to be supported in my campaign by people who want to support me. I will not coercively take taxpayer money. So in that sense, I am still fundraising. Politicians who use that grant program, they're done. They got their grant money and they're off to the races. But I'm still fundraising. So if you could go to my website, KimberlyFiorello.com, and hit the donate button, I would appreciate folks' support.
And anything we have not covered that you would like to mention?
There's 8 weeks left in this campaign, and this is when folks start to pay attention. And as I said, this is a clear-cut choices in Connecticut. In my race and across the governor's race and every other state rep, Connecticut folks have a choice. You either choose to be free people, embrace free market solutions, and let's get back to Yankee ingenuity and prosperity and human flourishing, or we keep doing more of the same, the results of which we're all living with in our dismal economy, our poor results for children. And I think the choice is becoming clear in folks' mind. So I look forward to the next 8 weeks, and I look forward to victory in November.
Hey, Kimberly, I have one extra question.
Yeah.
So you're first term elected official. So can you assess the difference in the political environment, how it has changed in 2 years? Do you get a sense that there will be a red wave? Do you get a feeling with respect to what President Biden has done negatively to the country? Do you get more of a positive impact and questions and support now as opposed to 2 years ago?
I am very encouraged that it's becoming clearer that what is right and what is wrong is wrong. It's making very clear to me that this whole idea that Republicans in Connecticut were fiscal conservatives, social liberals, that kind of Democrat light squishy world, it's meaningless, and it has proven disastrous for the people of Connecticut. It's a choice, not an echo, that we want to provide. And that choice with these each month that passes as a politician in Connecticut, I am so gratified that moral leadership of the Republican Party is clearer. And for me, I've always been a confident Republican, and I feel like the sun is shining on my party, and our message is so good. I'm very grateful to be in this time working as a politician in Connecticut.
Well, Connecticut Republican State Representative Kimberly Fiorello, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you both for all your work reigniting liberty.
Thank you. Folks, thanks for checking out Reigniting Liberty. And remember, everyone has a role to play. What are you doing for liberty? Until next time.